Hi there. Thank you for joining From People Pleaser to Personal Power. In this masterclass, I'm aiming to dispel some of the myths that you might hold if you are a people pleaser and to understand more about the shifts that you can use that are quite straightforward, but once you know them, you can put them into place and make a difference in your life. That's the reason why I wanted to share this masterclass. So thank you for joining. It should last between 30 to 40 minutes, presenting through slides. And there is a chance at the end to book a call with me if you'd like to, and also to ask any questions if you have any in the chat. I've got somebody with me, my executive administrator, who is going to be helping me with putting stuff in the chat, helping to answer any questions if you have any around either the topic or particularly anything more informational based. All right, so welcome. I'm going to share the screen then and we'll start the presentation. If people are joining afterwards, not worry if you miss some of this. It is being recorded, so there will be an opportunity to play back at your leisure when you have a chance. It is rather warm today, so you might, well done if you have come live, but you might feel that you want to maybe listen to this another time if you can't turn live. Okay, so this webinar is around people pleasing. And is it something that you recognize in yourself? If you do already, you can put that in the chat. I too have been a people pleaser myself, so I know those experiences of always putting somebody else first, really finding it hard to voice your own opinion, be really worried about whether people like you or whether you're going to upset anybody. And it often leads to overworking, really finding it hard to sort of put your needs first and stop doing things for everybody else before you. So in this session, if you feel like you're somebody who maybe smiles as you're saying yes, but really inside you're wanting to say no and feeling really uncomfortable, or you wonder why do I feel so bad when I'm saying no, when really it's okay. I know it's okay to say no, but I feel so bad. It feels so difficult to do it. It's really hard to do. You might want to feel more understanding of yourself, have more clarity, and maybe have some strategies from this session to try out for yourself. And of course, at the end, I'll be sharing with you that you can book a call with me free, no strings attached. If something in this masterclass resonates and you want a little bit more understanding or clarity for yourself, want some steps forward, I'm really happy to help because it's something I feel passionate about. For me, I have worked with many people and many women who struggle with this experience of people pleasing and find themselves beating themselves up. They can't seem to say what they really mean and follow through on the things they really want to follow through on, particularly for themselves. And it's about understanding this is not a character trait about you, it is a behavior, a conditioned response. And so we'll move into that a little bit. But once we recognize it in ourselves and are able to see it, we can make those changes. And over time, they really do make a difference. It's like learning how to stand your ground, learning how to open up and have an opinion, to feel uncomfortable but do it anyway. And I help women now do the same. And I've developed the Authentic Confidence framework, which really helps to galvanize some of these steps that I'm talking about today and really embed them into your life. So that's my mission, is to really support and encourage women to have a voice, have an opinion. So in today's session, we'll be looking at why people pleasing isn't a flaw of you and why it's a survival response. So understanding that a little bit more, because that really helps you to not beat yourself up about it. And then I'm going to just go through 3 quite straightforward shifts that can help put you first and help shift where you're at now into something that's much more healthy and progressive for you for this session. So what I was saying, and this is the first point, that fundamental is that people pleasing isn't about me being a kind person. That's why I people please. It's part of me, it's who I am. It's a survival mechanism. And when we understand that, it's a response, it's a learned behavior, then we realize we can unlearn it. So that's the basis that we can then move forward from, that it's not something about me that is impossible to change. It's my DNA, and an idea that it means if I'm pleasing others, it means I'm a kind person. You are a kind person and you don't have to please people all the time. You can take care and respect what you need as well. So let's dive into that a bit further. Just letting my dog out of the room because she was in here. She likes to be with me, but I'm letting her out now. Let's have a look at the survival instinct. What I'm talking about is the conditioned response. And we know about the fight and flight and how when we're in threat situations that might be real or perceived, so the threat might be something that's external that's happening, or it might be our thoughts about something or an image in our mind that we feel is very threatful, and it's maybe a memory of something or an idea of something that could happen. It leads to the amygdala, which is in the brain. It's the alarm system in the brain getting activated. And it sends a cascade of adrenaline and cortisol, which affects the body and creates this fight or flight sensation. So we either stand our ground and ready to fight, or we're ready to run away if we feel that there's nothing we can do and we need to get away as quickly as possible, then that happens. And some of you might know about the freeze response, which is part of that too. And that is when there doesn't feel like any other option and our body freezes up. We see it in some animals, particularly like deer and rabbits. It's usually when we feel we are under threat from a predator, that someone more powerful than us is in the vicinity, and that might make us freeze. And we might notice that in terms of our mind goes blank. We can't seem to speak. We can't seem to say anything. It freezes us in that mode. So they're the three main ones in terms of fight and flight survival when there's maybe a threat, perceived threat. But some of you might not know that fawn is also a survival instinct, and it really sits within the social threat arena. But as humans, the aspect of social threat is as real and can be life-threatening, especially in the past. If we were pushed out from the group and we're having to sort of find our own way, find our own survival on our own, we're less likely to live. So being part of the group is fundamental for our overall survival and health and well-being. So that aspect of fawning comes into that social threat, that perceived again, so an idea of it, or it's real, it's happening. We're in a group where there's bullies and there's things happening. Now, when we understand it, how does this fawning become the survival behavior that we adopt? It's often when we have learnt that doing these actions of making sure other people are okay, being helpful, being quiet, being agreeable, have meant that we get the praise, the love, we get accepted, things remain calm, there's no conflict, then we are learning that that pattern keeps us safe. It keeps the peace for others and ourselves. And the way the brain works, and this is what's interesting, is that it's not about logic. So all of these responses are coming from the amygdala, they're coming from that threat response, and they're not in the rational part of the brain. And once we have a response that works in that initial sort of environment, our brain then likes to repeat that because it says, well, if it worked for me before, then it's going to work for me again. So it tends to go to the same response again and again. So we find ourselves caught in a conditioned, repetitive cycle. And for people who fear that rejection are likely to then keep going with that behavior, even though you might feel really tired, stressed, you don't want to say yes, and yet you find yourself doing it. So it's about understanding that this is a pattern, it's coming from the past, it is for survival, and it can be changed over time. And in order to help ourselves through that, it's about utilizing some shifts in our attention, in our mindset, and in our actions. So what I mean by that, so in our attention, it's about noticing and naming what's happening, being able to sit with the situation long enough to identify what is it that's happening right now, what is it that I can notice in myself, what thoughts and feelings are coming up, and what do I actually want? So we'll look into that a little bit more first part of this. And then we'll be looking at how do we replace the way we talk to ourselves? So replacing the narrative so that we become less guilty and treat ourselves with more compassion. So if we have a different viewpoint about what it means to say no, for instance, then we will over time feel less guilty about it, be kinder to ourselves, and learn that what we thought was going to happen doesn't happen. And that introduces then that confidence for the change. And finally, the shift that really puts it all into place is taking the actions that are coming from this new perspective. Because we can understand the pattern, we can recognize that we need to tell ourselves something new. But if we don't put it into action, nothing really changes, and we don't embed it, and we don't feel any differently. We tell ourselves off then because we're not actually seeing the difference in our actions and in our behavior, which really makes the difference in our lives. So we can intellectualize it, but it's the felt sense that changing the pattern within us and doing it differently that makes the difference here. So that's all of this is straightforward in a way, but that putting it into action, feeling really uncomfortable until it gets easier, is often challenging. And sometimes it needs support. You need support to do it because it can feel overwhelming if you try to do too much too soon. Okay, so let's have a look at the first shift. And this is the basis. This is what I help people with in all sorts of areas of confidence, self-esteem, and for people-pleasing, perfectionism. It's about recognizing the problem, not overblowing it, not underestimating it, but being realistic about what's going on, being honest with yourself without feeling bad. So stop, pause, and reflect. I ask people to monitor, take note of when the feelings maybe of guilt or stress turn up, when high anxiety, and what's going on at that time. And asking yourself, what is it that I actually want? Because most people pleasers don't really know, because you're so used to, and I myself was part of that, so used to doing things for others in a way that you're staving off any conflict, you're making sure nothing bad happens. And in actual fact, what's going on is you're losing sight of what you really want. It becomes harder and harder to know that intuition, that inner voice is very, very soft, very quiet. So pause, and before saying yes, maybe ask yourself, am I doing this because I should do it or because I want to? What do I want? And that can help you to reflect and then see, right, this is where this is showing up. This is what I need to work on most of all. So it will help highlight what's really affecting you most in your daily life at the moment. I'm going to share an example with you now. So this is Emma's story, and Emma I worked with last year, and she works in a corporate position. She's a manager, and she is a project manager and has a lot of different projects on at the same time. And she has to report into somebody who was over asking her to do more and more projects because she had a reputation of being the one who could handle anything at work. So extra projects were put on her plate. People would come to her with questions about things and even last-minute requests to cover other colleagues who couldn't complete on their work. So on the outside, it looked like she was very reliable. She was a good colleague, a good team player. But on the inside, she was at burnout level. And she came to me because the stress was getting so bad she couldn't sleep. She was working into the evenings. Her relationships were really affected. She wasn't seeing people in the same way. And she was constantly anxious. So we worked together to understand why her default was always to say yes. And it turned out her agreement wasn't about wanting to help. It wasn't coming from that place of helping. It was coming from the fear of what people thought of her. So she didn't want to upset people or let them down, that they would then think she wasn't that nice. They would see her as difficult, as ungrateful, and that went right back to early years at school. And that really affected her, and it made her understandably really anxious if there were sort of opportunities to say no. But we worked on that. And again, it was asking that question, what do I actually want in this situation? But it was also because of the projects that she was doing and understanding her boundaries, we were looking at what her priorities were first, and then seeing whether what was being asked of her fit within her role, her boundaries, and what she could actually do. So we would practice by saying things like, I need to check my schedule before agreeing. So she might still agree, but then at least she was putting in a buffer zone first. And then she was able to then turn down work over time and see what fitted in with her role and what didn't. So her anxiety started to shift. She felt more in control of her day. And her performance then on her tasks improved rather than spreading herself too thin. And eventually, once we'd got to the end of our work together, she was in a completely different place, and her sleep had improved, her eating habits had improved, exercise had increased. So all of these fundamentals had started to shift as well because she had more time, space, and energy for those things. So shift 2, replacing guilt with compassion. And what I mean by this in this shift is really about understanding from that first shift where you're noticing and naming what's going on, is recognizing what the narrative is. So often we are thinking that others are going to have a response to us, that they're going to be upset with us, or that we are going to be in conflict, or there's going to be unhappiness. And we fear that so much or feel so bad about ourselves that we do the actions that we always do, repeating them because of that. But if we slow everything down and start to change the way we view that response and give ourselves the same respect that we would if this was somebody else, then we start to shift from feeling guilty to having more compassion about the feelings that might show up. So it's about being kind about the feelings. So they won't necessarily change straight away because this has been in place maybe for a long time, but it is something that you can shift. And what I like to say to people is, where do you place your attention? So if you're placing your attention on the negative idea of what you think might happen if you change what you're doing, then you're watering the weeds. But if you are able to understand that there might be another way of looking at it, you're not letting people down, you're showing up with more honesty. If you start watering that, then you start to grow the flowers. Because when we start setting boundaries, when we start to change, the biggest challenge is that a lot of guilt comes with it. There might be an idea in your head that comes up as well, a voice, that inner critic, that idea that you're letting people down, you're going to upset people, you're risking, rejection. Other people are going to have bad thoughts about you and you're a bad person. But instead of seeing that as the problem, seeing that as the pattern and you're willing to move through it, you can shift from going with those thoughts and saying, well, let's see what happens rather than going with the automatic. So be gentle with yourself, but have a different narrative about the same situation. So I always ask people to think about, if this was somebody else, what would you say to them? And start to repeat that out loud to yourself if you can, but if not, internally in your head. So you're pausing, taking a breath, slowing things down, and then replacing the narrative. So you're helping yourself to see it a different perspective. And this comes really from my CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy background. So I utilize some of that here. It's really helpful and it's so beneficial to be able to just challenge that automatic thinking. Because again, it's patterns, but it doesn't mean they're automatically going to be there forever. And this is an example that I thought would highlight that issue quite well. Because when I worked with Leah, she was a working mum. She worked full time. She had a busy job, but also felt that she should be there as soon as she got home from work. She had to be there for her children. She didn't give herself a break. She felt really uncomfortable and felt really guilty if she wasn't putting everything into her children when she got home from work. But at the same time, there was no balance. There was no time for her. She was worried, and what we came to, what was the idea, what was the narrative that she had that meant she couldn't take any time for herself? And it was that she felt selfish. So her pattern and her people pleasing was a fear of looking selfish. And that again came from her childhood and the experience within her family dynamic. And so we set up a suggestion of setting aside 30 minutes a day. And it seemed like that could be possible. And we talked about it and the guilt came up. What if they think I don't care? Was one of her key thoughts that came up immediately. And there was a lot of guilt around it. And it is really common. It is a common experience, the guilt. But we worked through it and we named it. We noticed, okay, you're feeling guilty right now because I'm worried that they'll think I'm selfish, I'm neglecting them. And then we reframed it. That's the old story. That's the old story. I'm telling myself I'm selfish, but actually the truth is I'm taking time for myself, and that's modeling self-care, not only for me, for my children, that it's important that we all have our boundaries, and I'm modeling a good practice for my children so they don't follow in my footsteps. And that really helped her shift. And then she committed, because of that shift, she'd understood there was another way that actually fitted with her values. She wanted her children to grow up with healthy boundaries, that helped her to move into doing things for herself 30 minutes a day. And that led again to her being less anxious, but less snappy, less resentful as well, and more connected with her family because she didn't feel on empty all the time. And in fact, they didn't feel more neglected. They didn't see that. They saw when she was able to be with them that she was there with them and not feeling resentful. So guilt doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. The guilt can be an expression of change and is about challenging the narrative, challenging the pattern of behavior until you see that it can change for the better for you. So Leah was a really good example of that. And the third shift, like I was saying earlier, is about putting things into action. It's about taking action and reflection. So updating, learning, and redoing the action again and again, so that consistency with what you've set up for yourself. Because like I was saying, confidence isn't something you're born with or born without. It's a skill. And like any skill, it can be developed with practice. So practice is about action, putting things into place. So turning that awareness that you've gained from shift 1 and shift 2 into momentum. What I'd suggest is setting up one significant action that you're going to stand behind. So once you've recognized the patterns over maybe a week, look at that and set up one action that you can take on. And don't try and do everything. It really is about small, consistent changes because they build and that momentum builds. So think about something that you can do that doesn't take too much of a strain, too much of a stretch, but a little stretch that helps you to sort of say, I can do that. And it has to matter to you. You have to know why you want to do it. So getting used to asking that question, what do I actually want in this situation? That's from the shift 1 is really helpful here. So when you've got your action, then you need to put in place the consistency of making that happen. Sometimes it's about practicing the saying no, if that's what you're going to stand behind. It might be about not apologizing so much. So whatever that is, practicing in the mirror, practicing your body language, your posture, so that you feel like you've built up some reps. And imagery and doing visualization can also help as well here, that I work through when I'm in the framework program that I work with. There's lots of different tools to help you in this action stage. And once you've done the action, that then leads to you then reflecting. So when you take action, notice you've done it and encourage yourself. Be the supporter to yourself and reflect on what went well, what you've learned, and what you can try or change or do better the next time round, and do it again, and then do it again, and then do it again. So the more you do it and the more consistent you are, the easier it gets. And we call that habituation. We call that being able to sit with it so that the feeling that you had that led you to avoid it or do the people-pleasing behavior starts to diminish, and it gets easier and easier to do. So in the last few slides, what we've been talking about is changing your self-view fundamentally and building that confidence, that skill in how you can show up and how you can take action becomes greater. That self-belief, your view of yourself changes once you start to take action. So get used to asking yourself what you want, slowing things down, taking stock. Notice what the negative narrative might be, the beliefs that are coming from the past that are part of that conditioned instinctual survival mode, and update them so they don't have to be there anymore in the way they are. But if we recognize them and we bring everything into the conscious part of the brain, your logical brain can start to overlay what was a survival instinct. Practicing your posture, your standing your ground, set your boundaries, set what you're going to do, and put this into action. And updating, praising each time you take action. So here's the cycle we're building. Action, it grows your capability, knowing you can do it, saying you're going to do it, and then completing on that. Reflection, that grows your confidence because you're building that sense of confidence in I say I'm going to do it and I do it, and I can see how that is changing my approach and my attitude. And the encouragement you give yourself makes you want to keep going. So confidence grows with repetition. It's one choice, one action, one reflection at a time. Okay, so If anything of those slides on people pleasing resonated for you, you want to know more about how you can break things down, how you can understand the pattern further of what created that conditioned response, then why not book a call with me today? And I can help you understand maybe the pointers that would help you with that so that you can put in place small changes that will help you. We can explore the barriers, we can explore what may be holding you back and what would make the biggest difference for you to start with. And like I was saying before, it isn't about doing everything. It is really about one thing at a time. And once you start, then that starts to expand and you start to have more self-belief in yourself that you can change from these feelings that were holding you back into something much more robust. And there's the bonus too of the free guided meditation. I've done a whole bundle of them, and this one is on self-belief and confidence, and it's a lovely adjunct to this people-pleasing masterclass that I've done today. So if you do book a call, I'll also bonus you this lovely free guided meditation as well as a thank you. And I'd want to just talk a little bit more about the authentic confidence framework that I've developed. It's a course over 8 weeks, and it's something where you learn the basics, the structure of recognition, understanding, being able to change the narrative and look at behaviors, utilizing different skills. So visualization, behavioral activation, mindfulness, compassion, all of those aspects that really help you with that shift. And once you've put that into place and you start to build that real confidence, being able to speak up, say what you want to say, not apologizing, not feeling anxious amongst other people, not comparing yourself anymore, you really do feel different and you can flourish. You start to see the difference in your life. So I really like that for people, but I'm not pushing that today. I'm really wanting just to explore with people anything I can help you with regarding the aspects of people pleasing would be really great. That's what I'd like. Because you deserve to have a life that feels like yours. You deserve to be able to speak up when you want to and say no when you want to, because that's not being selfish. It is self-worth. Looking forward to having that call with you. And you know you deserve a life that feels like it's yours. You know that other people take care of themselves and it's not selfish. It's about respecting yourself, respecting your own self-worth, like you respect others. So it's treating yourself the same as you would somebody else. All right. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you soon.